All right, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for showing up for our second graduate admissions presentation this week for Explore Graduate School Week. We are here today to talk to you much more in depth about the application process broadly, but then also specifically about the application process to University of Kansas or KU graduate programs. I'm Amanda Ostrico. I'm the Assistant Vice Provost and Director of Graduate Enrollment Management, and I'm joined here by my colleague Holly Schreiner, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm Holly Schreiner. I'm Assistant Director of Graduate Admissions and look forward to talking to you all more about the application process, how we do things at KU, and how that might be different or similar to other institutions. Thanks again for joining us.
All right, let's get started. So the first step, when you're thinking about your application for graduate school is to really prepare, with the material that you'll be asked to possibly submit with your application. So, looking at the lists over here on our screen, one of the first things certainly to look at is the coursework that you've completed, whether in your bachelor's degree or any other coursework that you might have completed post-bachelor's. Your grade point average or GPA is another component that a number of programs will certainly look at, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about GPA later in the presentation. Looking at your undergraduate institution and what type of experiences you might have had as you were an undergraduate, whether those experiences let you have a research experience or whether that's something that you think you might need to gain before you apply to graduate school. Certain programs will require test scores, whether that's the graduate record examination, the GRE, or the GMAT, or perhaps a standardized test for English proficiency. Those are going to be specific to the institution or to the program that you're applying to. Another component that applicants are often able to expand on when it comes to connecting their interests to graduate programs are any volunteering activities that they've done during their time as a student or certainly after they've completed their degree. And then certainly, anything like tutoring or other teaching experience or an internship or work experience that you might have had are all things that could be helpful to really elaborate on as you're applying for graduate programs. And when you're thinking about putting together your materials, things are going to vary depending on whether you're looking at a master's degree or a doctoral degree. And a master's degree could be a research-specific master's degree. It could be a professional-focused master's degree. You could be looking to attend full-time or part-time. Similarly, for doctoral degrees, while a number of them are very research focused, where the end goal is to produce research and knowledge. There also are professional doctoral degrees where you are still doing research as part of your program, but your end goal would be to be in a professional position where you're not necessarily expected to continue to always produce that research and knowledge. So then thinking about your next steps, really thinking about, do you have what you need to submit a successful application, or are there things that you would want to make sure that you're looking into more or taking advantage of while you're still in school, or able to find those other opportunities once you finish school? Let me go to the next slide to go into a little bit more detail about looking for a graduate program and how you can connect really your interest, what is required with your application, and then really the program that fits you the best. So when you're looking for a program, of course, one of the first things that you'll want to do is search online to see what's out there. That's a really great and easy way to start your search generally. What is out there that relates to your interest for graduate school. So certainly don't limit it to any specific institution. I think it's useful first to kind of see generally what options are out there for the field that you're interested in. Unlike undergraduate school, when you go to graduate school, there is a specific niche within your program that you'll certainly be asked to take more specific courses on. It's a way for you to gain more specific knowledge in an area rather than your undergraduate study where you're gaining a lot of knowledge in a lot of different areas, but of course you have a specific major. And so when you're looking for programs in your field, you'll want to take a look at, of course, the location. If location is something that you need to consider, if it's an on-ground program, of course, there are a number of online programs where perhaps location isn't a factor that you need to consider. But for a lot of students, we know location is incredibly important, both for you, it could be important for your family. And so that is something to consider, not just for the fit and feel for where you end up in your community, but then also thinking specifically about funding for your graduate program. Again, whether it's online or in person, when you think about the location of where that graduate program is, funding can really factor in, especially when you're thinking about, where is that institution located? So is it in the middle of the country where perhaps the cost of living is a little bit cheaper than on the coast? And you might need to really think about, what is the price of that program, and what are those funding options that you might need for going to a program that's in a more expensive city versus a program that might have more reasonable cost of living. One example I always kind of like to share here, tying, your program and your specific interest to funding, is about a graduate assistant that we used to have in our graduate admissions office who had some great offers across the country to pursue her PhD, including at some institutions really in the middle of the country where perhaps the cost of living was a little bit cheaper. And she knew that, based on her specific research interest in the public administration field, that it was really important for her to be in the certain type of city in order to do that research. And so ultimately she selected her institution, knowing that physically she wanted to be in the city where she knew the population existed that would help her with her research, even though she knew that also meant that was a more expensive program and place to live. Fortunately, she also was able to get a great funding package that worked out well for her to pursue that opportunity. So that's what I mean when I say you have to really think about what are your interests, and how does that then relate to the community you want to be in, and how you're able to fit that in within whatever budget you need for that program. Certainly, we always recommend that prospective students talk with faculty to learn more about the program. Faculty are essential to graduate programs. They're the ones who are really going to be working closely, not only teaching courses, but also working side by side, conducting research and really advising students, really helping them to make sure that that graduate program really does ultimately meet the goals of that student. And faculty, are a great resource and really want to talk about their research and kind of their area of expertise. So I certainly recommend that students reach out directly to faculty to make sure that what they're finding, on their website and in other materials is a good fit for their either research and or professional interest for what the faculty in that program can offer. Other great resources to talk to when you're really learning about the program and seeing if it's a good fit for you are current graduate students, possibly postdocs if it's a research program that you're interested in. I've certainly found that current graduate students also really do want to help prospective graduate students make sure that that program is a good fit for them, and are normally very happy to answer questions. Another great group to reach out to are what we call graduate coordinators. So these are staff members who are within graduate programs. Most graduate programs have a specific staff member that support students, often from the time they inquire about the program all the way until they become an alumnus of the program. And those graduate coordinators are incredible resources to start with and to connect with for really any questions that you have about the program, and how to connect with others in the program. So how to connect with other faculty or other graduate students in the program. So if you do have questions about who a graduate coordinator is, at least for our programs at KU, I'm happy to follow up afterwards and put you in touch with that person. Of course, program websites have a wealth of information as well. And so that's another place I always recommend that you initially start your search once you've honed in on kind of the general area that you want to study and those institutions that fit those programs. Certainly getting as much information from their website as you can is a great way to start that search. All right, so then certainly thinking a little bit about kind of the graduate school application process as a game analogy, as far as kind of who might be your coach or really your mentor for this process. I don't know how many of you were able to attend yesterday's central session where we talked kind of broadly about the graduate school and how it's different from undergraduate study and really kind of what everything that it entails. We did spend quite a bit of time talking about mentors and about how we look at mentorship at the University of Kansas, but then also just generally what it means to have a mentor and who might be those mentors. So, faculty are certainly a really great resource and often serve as mentors for students and help them identify the program that is really the best with their interests and support them through that application process. Those faculty are often the ones serving as your letter of reference writers, and they can often really guide students to that best fit for their graduate program. There also could be a supervisor that you've really connected with, and you see that person as your mentor who can help you to guide you through that graduate school application process. There might be others too. There could be classmates that you've come across who have the type of experience that you found to be really valuable, and that person can really give you some good advice on the graduate school application process and possibly review some of your materials. So there are a number of different options and ways you might identify mentors, but this is an area we certainly encourage students to make sure that they're thinking about, as they're preparing their application materials, who can give them guidance on the overall kind of process, looking for programs that fit, but then also specific materials that they might want to ask others to review for them. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Holly now to talk more specifically about the application process and all of the pieces and parts that are often required with that.
Great, thank you, Amanda. So we spend our day in graduate admissions helping applicants, potential applicants, those with questions about the University of Kansas graduate application, and occasionally answering questions about grad application processes in general. Some things are going to be very specific to any institution of higher education. So the way that the University of Kansas does things may be different than other international or domestic institutions, but some things are fairly common across the graduate application process. So when you decide to sit down and begin an actual application to an institution, what does that look like? What types of things should you expect? And what types of things might an institution be requiring of you? So many times common application materials include proof of a bachelor's degree or any other post-bachelor coursework or degrees. So many institutions are looking to make sure that you have an undergraduate degree, that you either have one or that you will finish one prior to starting graduate study at their school. And many institutions will want to know information about any other coursework you've taken after getting a bachelor's degree, whether that be a graduate certificate or a master's degree if you're pursuing doctoral study, that kind of thing. That's certainly the way that it is at our institution. One of the most important things that we look for in the application process is that proof of a bachelor's degree. So that's something to be ready to explain and to be ready to input into an application when you're ready. If you are a non-native speaker of English, is how we qualify things at the University of Kansas, proof of English proficiency is going to be required. At nearly all domestic institutions in the United States, Some proof of English proficiency will be required. However, that institution determines they need that information. Some institutions may want that from any student who's an international student. Some might want that from any students who self-qualify as non-native English speakers. At the University of Kansas, we do things one way. Proof of English proficiency broadly can be shown in a number of ways. The most typical and the most kind of baseline way are through standardized tests. TOEFL is a standardized English test offered through ETS, which also does the GRE exam. And then IELTS is another exam that is fairly typical and standard across institutions. Other schools may have additional tests for English proficiency, though TOEFL and IELTS tend to be kind of the industry standards here in the United States. Those scores, by the definition of the testing organizations, are valid for 2 years. So most institutions are going to be looking for verified, valid, current test scores or other proof defined by that institution's policies. So pay attention to what that institution requires, what you might be needing to show, and then always look to the application to help guide you through the answers to, or how those questions might be phrased on the app and what you might need to provide. And then be ready to provide support or supplementary materials. These are things like letters of introduction or a personal statement, a resume or a CV, letters of recommendation, a writing sample, GRE scores. At the University of Kansas, all of those things are entirely departmental specific. So each individual department can decide what they might ask for of an applicant. Other institutions might have a standard university requirement saying that certain things have to be required by the university. So common admission requirements at the University of Kansas, like I talked about a few minutes ago, we require at least a bachelor's degree from a regionally accredited U.S. institution or a foreign university with substantially equivalent bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree requirements. So again, by the time you begin grad study at the University of Kansas, you must have earned a bachelor's degree. And then graduate programs might have specific requirements regarding a GPA. At the University of Kansas, there is no minimum institution GPA required, though individual graduate programs can decide that they have a specific GPA that they require for that field. And then at the University of Kansas, we have specific English proficiency requirements for those standardized tests that we talked about. There are additional ways to meet proof of English proficiency at the university if you are showing that proof of English proficiency as a non-native English speaker via official test scores. This is how we qualify the TOEFL and the IELTS and another test called the PTE, which is far less common, but we do receive PTE test results. Our process is that we have what we call a full admission category and then an admissions proficiency category. Both of these are regular full admission for students, though the admissions proficiency band requires a check-in at our Applied English Center, where the full admission band does not require a check-in at our Applied English Center, but the actual admissions themselves are full and qualified. So there's a lot more information about our specific requirements regarding proficiency in the presentation on our website, and our office is always happy to help kind of parse through what an individual applicant might need to provide based on how they determine the answer to the question, are you a native English speaker? So many times there's typical admissions requirements in a program that are separate from either an institution or a centralized office. These are the things like the personal statement and letters of rec. So as you are thinking about and investigating and researching the programs that you want to apply to, pay attention to what that specific program indicates on the website that it might ask of you. So do a little bit of research and say, okay, at KU, this department indicates that they are going to want a personal statement. They are going to want X, Y, and Z for me to apply. I have written a personal statement for graduate study. And so before I did so, I wanted to make sure that I kind of knew what that program wanted. I wanted to make sure that my personal statement was focused on that specific program at that specific institution. But I also wanted to get some feedback before I uploaded it and hit send on my application. So who might you look to for feedback? Have current faculty with whom you work as an undergrad student or a grad student read it and comment on it. I think many faculty members at your current institution or faculty members with whom you have a relationship would be very happy to read a personal statement and to provide support and feedback for that as you investigate grad school opportunities. If your institution offers a writing center, absolutely use that writing center as a resource, get feedback from the writing center, get feedback from fellow students. If you have colleagues and peers that you consider close to you and you're comfortable sharing your personal statement with them, get feedback from them. I think other people who know you can point out either strengths in your letter or things that you might have forgotten that they would suggest that you include in your personal statement. And it's very important that you not do it all at once and consider it finished after 10 minutes. Unless you are exceptionally good at writing that way, it's always best to write your statement, to save it, to go back to it, to edit it, to rewrite it, to ask for that advice from folks, and then to finalize it before you upload it to an application. Similarly, many departments will require letters of recommendation. Again, this is going to be at KU, a departmental requirement. Some institutions might require letters of recommendation. At KU, the program determines if they require letters of recommendation. So as you're considering any letter of recommendation requirement, think about the purpose of that letter. Why is the department asking for letters of recommendation on your behalf? Then you will want to make sure that the types of people that you're asking to provide those letters can provide that information for that program. So who should write the letter? Think about who you might ask. If you are in a more professional graduate program or are applying to a more professional grad program, they might be looking for supervisor letters of recommendation, people who know you in a professional setting. Whereas other programs that are heavily research-based might really want people to be talking to your academic ability in very heavily research-based programs. So pay attention to the types of letters that programs want. And if they don't have lots of information about that, reach out and ask. The graduate program coordinator that Amanda mentioned at any institution, but certainly at KU, is going to be happy to say, these are the types of information, the types of people that we would be liking to see letters of recommendation from. Submission processes are going to vary. For institutions at the University of Kansas, you input the people that you are asking to be recommenders in the actual application, and you can put those names and email addresses in and send off that request for a recommendation even prior to finishing your application submission. We always strongly recommend that you contact the people that you are asking to be your recommenders and make sure that they are agreeable to be doing so. Sometimes we will get emails from recommenders who say, I have a request for this student and I have no idea who they are. And it can be awkward because then we say, well, that's what the applicant asked for you. Or they'll say, I've had this student in class for 3 weeks and I don't know enough about the student yet to provide this information. So always reach out to the people that you're listing, make sure that they're agreeable to be a reference for you. Let them give you the opportunity, or let them ask questions about what types of things you're interested in so they can best support you. There is typically a question on the application regarding references and recommendations of, do you as an individual want to retain the rights to see those letters? Or do you waive those rights to see those letters? We generally recommend, and most recommenders will say, to waive the rights to see those letters. Most recommenders don't want to necessarily know that an applicant will be seeing the letter that they write on their behalf. Even if it is a glowing positive letter, they would prefer that the applicant themselves not see the letter. So our recommendation and industry standard tends to be that yes, you should waive the rights to see those letters. And then how many will be dependent on the program or the institution. Most of the time at KU, if there are letters of rec required, it's going to be 3, but occasionally it's 2, and some programs don't require any. At the University of Kansas, GRE, or that general graduate exam, is a departmental requirement. It is not an institution requirement, though that could be different at a different institution of higher education. When it comes to the GRE, it can be a stress-inducing test. Lots of people will say, I don't want to take the GRE, I don't test well. Is there a minimum score requirement? How is this going to play into how the department looks at my application? All of those are great questions for a department if they do require the GRE. I will say at the University of Kansas, we do see fewer programs requiring this as an absolute yes requirement on an application. But if you do need to take the GRE, as with any standardized test, practicing is going to help you improve your score. There's lots of information and resources available to help understand the types of questions on the GRE and how to practice that test. Understand the structure of the test so that when you sit down to take it, it's not a complete surprise to you. It's not something that's completely foreign and uncomfortable. Know what works for you as you approach standardized testing, but do keep it in perspective. The GRE is a piece of an application potentially, but is generally not the only thing that guarantees your success as a strong candidate or a weak candidate. Transcripts are going to be very important generally in the application process. That is certainly true at the University of Kansas, as we are looking for that proof of a bachelor's degree and then information about
All right, I think that Holly's internet might have frozen up there. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in here for a minute while Holly gets logged back on. So Holly was talking about transcript requirements, which are incredibly important. The transcript, at least at the University of Kansas, we are looking institutionally for at least a bachelor's degree. And our graduate admissions office works closely with our programs to make sure that we have that information for all of our applicants. Certainly applicants may have additional work beyond their bachelor's degree. They might have, a master's degree or a certificate or just other additional graduate work. And so those official copies of the additional work should also be included with the application. And if there is a degree for any of that additional work, the official transcript does need to be sent to the institution. When it comes to the processes we have at the University of Kansas, we allow on the online application applicants to submit a copy of their official transcript. So a copy is when you go to your registrar's office or whatever that office is that produces transcripts and really confers degrees for your institution. That institution can give you, it's still an official transcript, but you have it in your possession and you're uploading a copy with your application, or maybe they send it to you electronically to do that. A lot of times students want to upload the copy during the process because they are still working on their degree. They haven't yet finished, their bachelor's degree or whatever degree they're working on. We will need at some point at KU the final official copy sent directly from the institution for that applicant if they're admitted. And so we give students some time, 1 semester, to provide that. So anyone who is admitted, they do have that first semester to have their institution directly send that final official transcript that has degree conferral on it. And so those documents are either mailed directly from the institution, or for a number of our US institutions, we do have an electronic process where we can get those official final transcripts. There are additional forms too beyond the transcript that certainly are part of the application process. There's some general information that everyone will be asked to submit. And Holly, I jumped in while you were logging back on here. Yeah, I guess if you want to take back over, Holly, I just kind of wrapped up the transcript part talking about, you know, what our requirements are at KU. And then if you want to go over kind of the additional forms, certainly that they'll be asked to submit with their application, they can let you pick it back up.
Absolutely. So sorry about that. Technology is equally wonderful and challenging and frustrating. So every institution is going to have its own graduate application form itself. Most institutions are going to have those forms be online. That's the way that it is at the University of Kansas. Again, most of those application forms are going to allow you, as you work through it, to save changes and to work through pages and complete the application at your own timeline. I would always encourage you to pay close attention to deadlines and to be working on an application in advance, and to not be waiting to submit an application right up against a deadline. I know that there's a temptation to do that many times to make sure that everything is perfect. The closer to a program deadline at KU or someplace else that you go, if there are any systems related challenges or any issues that you're having with either a system or with getting documentation that application requires, the stress for you is going to be heightened if you are waiting and it's 8 p.m. on the day that the application is due and there's no one available at the institution to answer your question. There's a problem with you getting into the application and it won't allow you to submit for some reason, and the deadline is midnight and it's 7 p.m. in the United States and people aren't working, and that can be a really unfortunate and highly stressful experience. So be aware of deadlines, but be trying to get that application in before a deadline and not right up against the deadline. So work through the application, answer the questions honestly and accurately. Most applications are going to adapt based on how you answer those questions. And then once you submit the application, remember to check that status or that portal for information about where your application might be. At the University of Kansas, our application has a checklist that students have access to and can see, and it will show you when all of the required documents or requirements for that specific program are in, and kind of when it has gone from either an application pending all of the materials to all of those materials being received. Follow all of the instructions on any graduate application. Make sure that you understand those transcript requirements. And then if you need to reach out and confirm receipt of anything in regard to your application. I'm going to echo what Amanda said about faculty. I think many times current undergraduate students or those who have been out for a while of higher education are concerned about reaching out to faculty and getting faculty perspective, whether it be at your own institution or at the institution that you're looking to go to grad school for. I will say that every faculty member I have ever worked with in graduate admissions at the University of Kansas, when asked if they would like a prospective student to reach out, has said absolutely. I am here to be a resource and to find the best fit for a potential graduate student and the University of Kansas. Now, does that mean that they might reply immediately to your email? Perhaps not, but every faculty member has said, I want them to reach out, and I will be happy to serve as a resource for them. So at your current institution, you are going to have more luck probably with the faculty member providing a letter of recommendation, certainly if they know you and have a relationship with you, rather than just having you in class to verify that, you know, that they had you in class, that kind of thing. So when it comes to that faculty perspective, both at your current institution and at an institution that you're interested in, please reach out and have a good engaged conversation with those faculty members. And then admissions committees do look at the entire package. They're not going to be looking at one specific thing that is the make or break generally. They're going to be looking more holistically at you as an individual and as an applicant. So they're going to be looking at your undergraduate institution, the grades and courses you took, those letters of recommendation. Do your interests fit with the department or the program or the school's research interests and or expertise? Do they require research experience? Do they require professional experience? All of those things are going to come into play when an admissions committee sits down to look at an application. And then every program is going to have a different review process. Some programs at the University of Kansas have a very large committee that looks at applications, whereas other programs have a director of graduate study or one individual faculty member. So it's going to vary across the university or across institutions, but generally people are going to be looking at the entire package. So the KU admissions process looks like this. You apply to a graduate program online and you submit the application and pay the application fee for the application to be fully submitted. Our model is that those applications go directly to the program for review. Our office isn't pre-reviewing anything and pushing it forward to a program. If you apply to a program, that application is going to be immediately available to that program, and they are going to manage the timeline for that application review. So they'll be making sure all of the requirements are on the record that they need. They're going to handle their review process the way that they have it set up, and then they will finally forward their recommendation to sometimes the school or college at that institution or directly to graduate admissions for our final review. If the school or college reviews the application and or it comes to our office, we will be reviewing that application. We're looking for those university minimum requirements, proof of a bachelor's degree, proof of English proficiency for non-native English speakers. And then our office updates the student record and we email the official decision notification to the applicant. Applicants will get an email that will indicate that a decision is ready for them, and they log into their application portal and are able to see their decision letter. And our model is that admitted students get their KU student ID number in that official decision letter, and then that's what they use to set up their KU online ID and their whole student record. But that's kind of the process at KU, is that it goes from application directly to the program and or school, and then to our office for finalization. So we are involved from the beginning to the end. We are happy to help applicants either get to the right place or answer any questions that we can as folks are looking to apply. So please feel free to reach out if you need any help. And thank you for bearing with me as I dropped there for a little bit. I'll pass it back to Amanda.
Glad you're able to log back in. So I'm going to wrap this up here. We're talking a little bit about funding and how those offers work, and then we should have some time at the end for questions. So I know we do have a funding session that's specifically set for tomorrow also. I hope that some of you are able to join that session, or certainly will be able to access that recording and those materials after we're able to upload those to our website. So we've listed on the slides here the typical ways that graduate students can fund their education. So, and these are specific to KU, but you will often find these at other institutions. So we have graduate research assistantships, graduate teaching assistantships, and graduate assistantships, or GRAs, GTAs, or GAs, or often the 3 Gs as we call them. We like to put acronyms on everything and then condense them even more. And so our graduate research assistantships, we have for students to focus on research. And I should say that all of these positions have in common that they're employed positions. So students who are in these positions are employees at the institution. They are expected to work a certain number of hours each week. You get a stipend for the position, and then there's also at least some form of tuition benefit, although they are slightly different across each. So for GRAs, those positions focus on research. They do have, all 3 of these, I should say, have in-state rates once you are at a 40% or higher rate. And so when you look at percentages, a 50% appointment is 50% of an expected 40-hour work week. So a 50% appointment would be for 20 hours. So a 40% appointment would be slightly less than that. I would say it's most common for people to be appointed at a 50% appointment, where the expectation is they're generally working 20 hours a week. And so GRA positions focus on research. You get a stipend. You're working closely with a faculty member, maybe a postdoc, certainly other graduate students in that area. And the tuition is also sponsored at 40% or higher for GRA appointments. GTA appointments are pretty similar, rather than research, you're focusing on teaching. And so those students are expected to teach certain courses. And again, the 50% appointment is the most typical way that the students are appointed. And so they're expected to complete their GTA responsibilities within 20 hours or so, generally for that week. Tuition is also sponsored at all sorts of different levels for GTA appointments. Graduate assistantships, GA appointments, those are for students really to focus on administrative aspects of an institution. These appointments also get they get the in-state tuition rate at 40%. Some programs choose to provide additional tuition benefits, but it does not necessarily come automatic with the institutional appointment. Again, the 50% appointment is the most common appointment that we see for GA positions. GA positions are very common in our education programs. Our higher education master's program has a number of GA appointments. We also see them in some of our museums or other areas that provide really general support and services to either students or our other communities on campus. And so those are the three ways that I would say typically if you're a full-time student in a graduate program and you're getting funding, those are the three ways that we often see our students are supported. In addition to that, there are a number of fellowships or scholarships that either programs offer or specific schools offer, or that you might find generally at the institution or externally. We have a whole page that links to opportunities that lists more information on external scholarships and fellowships that students are certainly eligible for. There also could be sponsorships. So for example, an employer could certainly sponsor someone's tuition. So there are a variety of different ways that graduate students can fund their programs, whether they are full-time or whether they are part-time. A lot of the funding is focused on students who are pursuing more full-time options, but not all of it. And I like to share, our School of Education as an example, which both Holly and I went through for our graduate programs. They have a number of scholarships that they open to any student who is willing to apply, and they have a lot of part-time students. And so, I was a part-time student and Holly was as well. We both were able to receive scholarships at some point throughout our graduate career. So I don't want to discourage students from looking at scholarship opportunities if you are part-time, but I do want to also be clear that generally a lot of the like 3G appointments are going to be for full-time enrolled students, but there are all sorts of other opportunities out there. So certainly take a look at what your program offers, what your school offers, and ask questions. If you're not finding anything, certainly reach out to us and we can connect you with the appropriate resource to make sure that you really are aware of all the opportunities out there. And this is, I think it's really important, kind of like I was emphasizing there with our School of Education example, that funding is different for every program. One of my messages over and over with our webinars we have is to reach out to the program really initially for almost all of your questions. And that's where I say that our graduate coordinators are incredibly helpful and that we can make sure to put you in touch with them so that you are getting that correct information for your program. And that's not just at KU. It's, I would say, at least at an institution like KU, at least in size and in the different offerings that we have, you will find there's often a staff member who is an incredible first point of contact to get you to the right place and to get you that information for your program. And certainly at the end of an application process for funding, we always remind students that they absolutely should have that in writing. That of course it's great to ask questions, whether it's over the phone or in a Zoom conversation, but in the end, when you have applied for funding or offered funding, that absolutely should come to you in the form of a more official email or letter indicating, here's exactly the type of funding that you're getting and how it will be allocated. So then looking at, the end of your application and admission process, it really is a two-part process when it comes to accepting your admission. So there's the admission itself that will come from, at least in the case of KU, will come from, like Holly said, our graduate admissions office. You'll get a notification that says, please click here to access your decision. So that is the first part of your admission decision. And you are asked to either accept or decline the offer of the admission itself. We strongly encourage everyone to either accept or decline. Just that's really helpful for our programs to be able to plan, whether it's for, maybe going to the wait list to offer other students an admission if you decide that their program isn't a good fit for you. It could help certainly with funding when it comes to programs looking at funding options and how they're going to allocate those. They would expect that those are the students who are accepting their admission offer as well, or also if you're not accepting your admission offer, that gives that program an opportunity to allocate that funding to another student in the program. So accepting the admission offer is incredibly important. It also then will trigger other communications and information that we send to you or that the program sends to you to really make sure that you have everything you need to enroll and to start your program. So, information about orientations, other training you might need to complete before you start your program, especially if you, for example, have a GTA position at KU. We have some required training that all new GTAs have to do. So it should be a pretty simple process as far as how you go in to accept or decline your offer. Of course, it's much more complex when you think about whether or not, that is the institution that you want to accept the offer from. We recognize there are a number of things that you'd want to consider. The second part is there could be a funding offer to accept with it. So some of our programs, especially some of our more research-based programs, will offer both an admission and funding at the same time. That would still be separate from that official notification that you're going to get from graduate admissions. Those programs would send an email to those applicants also saying, you've been formally recommended for admission. In addition, here's some, here's the funding that we're able to offer you at that time. So that's one way that could happen. It could also happen where your admission is processed and the program then, needs to review all of the applications that they have and then decide in the near future how they're going to allocate that funding. And so it also could be the next step later on down the road, you get a notification from the program saying, now that you have accepted our admission offer, you've been fully admitted, this is the funding that we can offer you. So it is a two-part process, but it can look a little different, just kind of depending on how the program communicates that. And I know we certainly get questions in our office about that. And again, this is where we would take that opportunity to connect you back with the program specifically to say, they can make sure that you have everything that you need to really understand the timeline for how all of that works and what you should expect to be getting from them. And then certainly, kind of when I mentioned, of course, deciding can be a complex process. You need to think about, do you have the funding that you would need and expect for this program? Do you need more information about, the community? Are you going to be, moving to this, brand new place that you've never been to? Do you need a campus visit? We certainly have a number of students who visit campus, or at a minimum, want to have a Zoom conversation. Again, that is a very good question to ask the program about if they have not already sent you information about how to connect either virtually or in person, with students in that program, with faculty in that program. That's a very reasonable expectation to know, especially if you are moving to a new location, how that community really fits with what you would want for moving to a new location for could be a number of years if you are in a doctoral program. Certainly thinking about the faculty in that program and whether or not, again, their research interests and their expertise and their professional experience really align with ultimately what your career goals are. All right, and so at KU, we also wanted to provide just kind of a wrap-up slide here for where you get started if you are looking at specific KU programs and how to start the application process. Our gradapply.ku.edu page is where you would either submit an inquiry form to a specific program, start your application, or look for more information directly about the program. There are links directly to the program pages from this site. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing and formally wrap up our presentation part here. So thank you everyone for attending, and then I'll stop the recording and we can take some more questions.